Hello, welcome back. I'm Roberto and we are learning Rust. Also today with us, where are
Luciano,
you?
hello.
Luciano, yeah, where are you? Up, left, right, some direction. If you don't know this channel, in this channel we talk about Rust and technology. You can find the recordings of the previous stream on YouTube. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we stream every day, Monday, 6 p.m. Dublin time on Twitch. Last time, Luciano was alone and he did a beautiful job doing some debugging of an old Lambda that was powering his newsletter. And there are some refactor that we have PR to show you, and we need to merge them, and a bunch of other stuff that he did last time. Today, we will go on with that. We will try to put these monolithic Lambda into step functions, try to split out pieces from this monolithic Lambda. And I think for today will be everything. But if we will also start writing the code, rewriting the code from Node.js to Rust. But I think that will be done next time. So, Luciano, explain us where are we with the changes from last time.
Sure. Let me give a super quick recap of what is Full Stack Bulletin. This is the project we're working on today, and this is a project that I've been working on for a few years now. The initial commit, I think, was like 7 years ago or something like that. And everything is open source. We'll be looking at the repository. So if you're curious, you can actually check out when actually was the first commit. And the idea of this project is basically if you are a full stack developer, there is so much stuff that it's new every week. And how do you even keep up? Right. So that was the starting point of this project. And the idea was like, why don't we create a newsletter where we select 7 interesting articles or videos or pieces of information that you can just check out every Monday. And then there are also some other things like an inspirational quote and a book suggestion. And you get this free email every week, like a newsletter. And that's one way to try to keep up with new stuff that can be interesting for full stack developers. Of course, maintaining this thing every week is a lot of work. So the idea was let's try to automate as much as possible so that it gets easier to keep doing this over and over every week for years. And the automation is basically I post interesting stuff on Twitter every time that I find interesting articles during the week. And then there is this Lambda that starts every Friday, I believe, and it scrapes my Twitter, checks all the links, does some kind of ranking, extrapolate the top 7 links, sends all this information to a MailChimp using a template, and it creates kind of a draft newsletter that then I can edit during the weekend and get it ready for the next Monday. So that's kind of the process. And last time we had a couple of problems. The first problem was that I was using Hootsuite as a mechanism to schedule tweets. And I was explicitly looking for posts being made by Hootsuite in this automation. But very recently, Hootsuite has removed every free plan. So I was not using it anymore. So I needed to update the pipeline to basically ignore Hootsuite and just look for any tweet. That was one problem. The second problem is that we expected that Twitter would have removed all my API access. And it turns out that I still have API access, so we can still use Twitter. We don't have to migrate to Mastodon or something else.
Don't tell them.
Yes, don't tell them, please. They told me they would remove all my API access, but apparently not true. Still working. Fingers crossed. And there was another issue that basically this was kind of a small bug that we spent a lot of time debugging. But basically, when there were no posts being found out, just because I wasn't posting anymore, I couldn't post on Hootsuite. Basically, the entire pipeline would crash because there was an access of an undefined property. It was just trying to access the first link, but there were no links. So we fixed all of that. And during the weekend, I also spent some time refactoring because you might remember if you watched the previous live stream that there was like Babel and Webpack, and just trying to debug stuff was very complex. So even the stack traces were all messed up, like they were not really pointing to the right place just because of source map being screwed or something like that. So let's look at two PRs where we're trying to clean up, and this is going to be the starting point for today. Meanwhile, we have Pedro Rock. Thank you for the follow. And anyone, feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll try to answer as best as we can. All right, so this is Full Stack Bulletin. I'm going to drop the link in the chat as well. If you want to check it out and subscribe, you can also check out the previous emails. And the last one just came out like right now. This is literally probably like 10 minutes. It just came out, this one, this Monday. So also check out the last newsletter if you're curious.
Is this done by the Lambda or you did that by hand?
I actually have those two PRs that fix all the problems, and even though they are not merged, I already deployed the code. So this was done with the latest changes.
Cool.
So, hello, Eva4. How are you today? Okay, so let's look at these two PRs. And I did two separate PRs for different reasons. So the first one is the one that removes Webpack and Babel. And again, the reason why I was using these two technologies is because this code was like 6 or 7 years old. There wasn't even async await in Node.js. So I was trying to use async await through Babel and compiling through Webpack. So there was a lot of overhead that I don't think is necessary anymore these days. Now, there are lots of files here just because these are like changing pretty much every file. Just small touches, but I'm just gonna quickly show you the gist of it. Let's see very quickly. What can we see? All right, so oh yeah, I also removed the jest because jest was giving me problems with ESM, and I replaced it with vtest. And it was the first time that I was using vtest, and I have to say I really like it, and it was super straightforward to transition from jest to vtest. Okay, so
how it is to move from 7 years ago technology to today technologies on this field?
It wasn't too bad, but I mean, I needed to touch almost every single file, so it was a bit painful. But then it was very mechanic work. Like it wasn't rewriting everything. It was more like
but also you say that there was no async at the time, correct?
But I was doing async through Babel, so it wasn't too bad in that sense that I was already doing, let's say, modern JavaScript just because I was using Babel with the latest, trendiest stuff. But yeah, at the same time, it is still painful to go through this process where you just want to get rid of the pre-compilation step. So let me see if there is anything interesting to see here. Like this is just changing all the tests. And vtest also supports snapshots. It supports pretty much everything that is supported in Jest. So I just needed to change literally, for instance, the imports. And that was pretty much it. Let me see anything interesting here. Yeah, of course, I removed the Webpack file. Also, the other thing is that because I was building, I was creating a build folder, and that was the one that I was shipping through to AWS. Now I'm just shipping my source code as it is. So that also makes it a little bit simpler.
No need for pre-compilation anymore.
Exactly, yeah. So even if we look at the package JSON, I don't have a build step anymore. I had all these different build steps. Now it's literally just deploy as it is.
Zip everything, upload it, done.
Exactly. Let's see what else. Yeah, I think this is probably it. Like, I don't think that it's worth looking more here, but I'll drop the link to this PR if you're curious to see more, and feel free to leave me comments. Okay. Hey, we have Kelvin in the chat. How are you, Kelvin? Okay, so I'm not going to merge this one straight away because I want to show the other PR. So the other PR is a little bit more interesting. So what I did originally, because of course, when you start a new project, especially if this is like 7 years ago, you always over-engineer it just by default.
Yeah.
So what I was doing is like, okay, I have this idea of a newsletter, but the core of this newsletter is this engine that can scrape stuff from Twitter and extract interesting links in different ways. Maybe that's something that I can make a library out of it and make it generic enough so that other people can use it. So when I started this newsletter, I started the Lambda code and then the library code. And I think initially it did make sense. Then eventually I kept adding more and more features to the library just because I needed it in the Lambda in my specific project. And I think at some point this library didn't make sense anymore as a generic library. Like what I was doing was literally just fixing one comma in the library, publishing a new version, going back to the Lambda, bumping the specific version of the library, and just ship the new Lambda. So I was just making my life more complicated for no reason. And here I needed to remove that filter for Hootsuite, which by the way was hard coded. It wasn't even like an option that I could just configure. So just to tell you how it wasn't a library anymore. So what I did in this PR was basically bringing back the code from that library back into the Lambda. And this was more painful than I expected because surprisingly, I had used totally different configuration for Webpack, for Babel. I was using a different test runner. So it took me a lot of manual work. And that's why there are like 57 files. So again,
This pull request goes against main or against the other one?
so this one goes against.
Master.
Actually, let me step back. This is the first one that I did, and then the other one goes against this one. So what we can do, we can merge the other one first into this one, and then this one into main. So it's a little bit easier because this is also the way that I built the PRs. I was branching off from the previous changes.
Yeah, because you changed everything. Instead, here you worked on top of the old Webpack way of doing stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
it's the history of a lot of libraries. You build a library, it needs to do a lot of specific stuff, but if you want to still have it released, you must parameterize everything to be able to make it completely customizable. And then basically it becomes more complicated than a programming language to use, and with a vast API.
exactly.
At that point, just use a programming language and don't even make a library.
Okay, so I'm gonna merge this one. So this is targeting the Babelify, so into demodularize. Amazing names. And now this one has all the changes, and I can bring it to master.
In this way, you don't have any merge conflict. But well, you branched from a branch, so probably you would not have.
No, that's why I did it this way. So I did the first branch, did all the changes, created the PR, did a second branch from that changing branch already, but targeting that branch again. So it's just to show you two different PRs because they are logically separated. But at the end of the day, I already shipped all these changes. So it's okay to just merge them all together.
Hello to Tommaso in the chat.
Hey, Tommaso.
Today we are doing a little bit less Rust, but we are preparing for it. So brace yourself.
Okay, so now the last thing that I want to do, and by the way, I'm going to give you the entire full stack bulletin organization because everything is open source, even the website, so you can pick around and see all the crap.
Even your Twitter API keys? No.
I hope not. Now I'm having doubts.
If you find something, guys, tell us.
Okay, so this is the library best scheduled tweets, the one that shouldn't be used anymore by anyone because I think at some point stop it to be like a generic purpose library. So what I did here, I did another pull request that is just changing the README saying don't use this anymore. So basically just saying this code has been merged back, so don't use it. And once I do that, I'm also going to deprecate the library on NPM itself. So I'm going to do this as well. And if we go to NPM, oh yeah, we can archive this repository, but let me go to NPM first. Ooh, I need to do this. Give me a second. I'll do it in another screen. npm.
Well, it's an OTP. Come on, nobody's going to use it. They will not
Never
be
know.
fast enough.
Never know. Okay, back here. So in settings, what we can do is deprecate package. Oh, come on. I'm not gonna type this. Okay, so what should happen now is that if you go to this library, let's see, npm.js, we should see like a deprecation notice. Should we?
Well, it was saying, give me a couple of minutes, probably. The website is statically generated, so it needs to regenerate statically this page,
We'll
distribute
check.
it. Yeah.
We'll
Distribute
check
it to all the CDNs and stuff like that, so there is a latency.
Okay, so this is all the PRs that we wanted to do, so we can tick that box. So should we start to look into refactoring?
We want to move the current mono lambda, let's call it, to a step function, then starting to split the functionality of this monolithic lambda in other smaller lambda and orchestrate all the data flow through step function. Is this correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So where do we start with? With the cloud formation visual editor, something like that?
So I think one cool thing we can use just for simplicity, and then maybe we'll try something else later, is if we go to step functions here on AWS, one cool thing that they added, I think in the last couple of years, is when you do a new state machine, you can create state machine and you can say, design your workflow visually. And we want to use a standard step function. By the way, the difference between standard and express is that express is kind of meant for APIs. So if you have to do something quick, maybe just something that replies to an API call, you would use express. It costs less, but it's more limited. We want to use standard because it's just a backend orchestration.
So it has less latency, so faster responses, and it's cheaper.
Yes, but you have less time, or less execution time as well.
So 5 minutes, it says there.
Yeah, and also it doesn't give you, I think,
5 minutes was the historical limit of lambdas. I mean, historical.
Well, now it's been 15 minutes for a few years.
Mm-hmm. I'm talking about when I was working there, so times ago.
So also standard, and this is one of the reasons why I would like to use step functions, is that when you use standard, and hopefully today we'll get to see that, every time you execute the step function, it keeps track of the entire history. So exactly what's happening at every step, what was the input of that step, what was the output, all the log messages, and it stores all of that information for you. So in the future, if you have a failure, you can just open the step function and you see the graph. You see exactly the node where the failure was. You can click it, see all the logs. So the debugging experience and the troubleshooting experience is just much nicer. With Express, I don't think you get that level of detail. That's probably
say
also
that you can only log to CloudWatch and debugging through the CloudWatch logs. That again was what you were doing 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So let's start to do that. And this is the cool thing. So if you use the visual editor, you have kind of a drag and drop experience. And then I think it should give us the equivalent CloudFormation. So when we are happy with it, we can copy paste and switch to bare-bone CloudFormation, where we can modularize a bit more. We can put it into Git. We can put it in our project and so on.
You can't export Terraform? Why not?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think the AWS is pushing Terraform out.
I might not be surprised if there is a project that will convert the CloudFormation to equivalent Terraform, but
there will be for sure.
Okay, so what do we want to do? So we want to do
Our current, can we just paste there our current lambda?
Yeah, I think that could be a good starting point, and I like the idea because then we could incrementally extract things out. So we always have something that should work. Okay, so basically the first step will be just this one lambda here, right?
Yeah, you need already to have the lambda, but you already have it. But let's make a copy of yours so we can work on that one.
So let's see how do we get the code. I don't remember here if there is an easy
now
way.
He's complaining that you have to specify a name. Specify a function name.
Pedro K is suggesting to check Cloudcraft. I haven't used it, but I've been using. I've been seeing other products that I believe are similar to Cloudcraft. Is Cloudcraft like another visual editor, or is more to convert between CloudFormation and Terraform?
I'm googling it. Cloudcraft, raw AWS architecture. Nice. I remember this one. Never used it, but I remember the isometric view of it. I was not aware that it can also create the infrastructure. I remember it just like a drawing tool.
So let me see. I think what we can do is that we have downloaded a YAML and we can open it there. Okay, so this is the YAML for the step function. That's not what I expected, to be honest.
It starts at lambda invoke. The state is called the lambda invoke. We could call the state something more nice.
Yes, let's
it contains only a state, only one step that is a task. Is outputting a payload, parameters nothing, retry here and there, and true. Okay, and it's the last action of the pipe.
Yes, so let's try to do one thing. Let's try to do some init. Let's try to start to copy these things because this is not complete CloudFormation as far as I know. Terminal. How do you open the terminal? There. Nope.
I do Command Shift
backtick.
Backquote. Yeah, backtick, backquote.
Okay, so if we do some init, we should be able to start. Quick start templates. Let's see what we have there. Maybe this is too small. Let me know if you can read it. Hello world example, multi-step workflow. Maybe this is what we want. Serverless API, schedule task, standalone function. Okay, let's go for multi-step workflow. And let's go with Node.js 18. Would you like to enable X-ray on the functions? For now, no. Would you like to enable monitoring? No. Project name. Stuck. Bulletin.
Where are you creating all of this?
So it's it did create an entire folder. Look at that. Not what I wanted, but we can extrapolate things out. Okay, so template YAML. This is what I wanted to look at. And this is, of course, a bit more involved because this template YAML needs to define the state machine itself. And then you need to define every single lambda that is part of that state machine. So basically, the state machine is just the shape of things that you want to do. You can have like parallel step, you can have dependencies, you can have retries. So it's kind of a workflow where you have multiple steps. Then in this workflow, you can also use lambdas to do custom stuff. you don't necessarily have to, like you can do certain things automatically. For instance, you can take data coming from a step and just save it into SQS, into DynamoDB without having to use a Lambda. So Lambda is more when you want to do custom logic, basically. So what we can do is to start to copy this file out and then figure out how to adjust it for our use case.
But can you import back this file into the graphical editor or not?
Good question. I don't think so, but let's try.
Because you started from the graphical editor, why you switched to the command line?
Just because I like to keep things in Git. And
Okay. But were you able to go on from here, adding and doing something, then exporting later?
there is an import definition.
Oh God, what will happen? Let's try.
Okay, let's try what it gave us. So I don't think it's going to be able to import this one. I think it's only going to be able to import. Let's compare these two. Sorry, these two are this one and this one. So let's open this one on the side. Let me close this one. So this one only says states. Starts
There is
at.
no resources.
So I think at some point here we have states. Let's see.
Yeah, but is at the first level, because now that is resources.
Type state machine.
And there is type task.
There must be a type task at some point.
There must be also states at some point.
So type schedule.
That is the triggering event.
Function. Simple table. So here is also using DynamoDB.
Way too much.
Yes, definitely stuff we don't need.
Try to go back to the graphical designer. Can you add a cron triggered event to trigger the start of the step functions in the graphical editor?
In the graphical, good question.
So there, can you say I want to start on a cron expression? That is a CloudWatch event. I don't know if you have a CloudWatch event.
Yeah, now they
somewhere
are
here.
event bridge events, but
Sorry, I'm old.
good question. Let's see. I think in the start, can we specify any? Yeah, I don't think we can specify the event. Probably we need to create the step function first, and then maybe we can specify the event that triggers it. While here in the code, we can immediately say the schedule.
Yeah, I want this schedule rate 1 hour. Your rate is rate weekly on Fridays.
Exactly.
In your case.
Now, the only thing that I'm not following here. Oh, there it is. Okay. State machine, stock trader, ISL, JSON. Cool. Now I understand how this works. And I think somebody mentioned that in the chat. Tommaso, yeah. Sorry about that. So in state machine, we have this stock trader, which is as a JSON, but we could convert this to YAML as well.
This is the file that we have to compare.
So this is the file that we can export and import. So does that make sense? Do we want to proceed manually?
Try to import the JSON and export the YAML, if it's possible.
So this one, right?
Yeah, try to import that one and export a YAML. Just
okay.
I'm curious like a monkey, sorry.
Reveal in Finder. I have it here in another window, believe me. Import definition. I should be able to drag and drop this guy. Of course not, because why?
You are too young.
Okay, so now where do I have this guy?
Downloads? No, too easy.
There.
Your project.
Full stack bulletin. state machine, stock trader, import. Cool. That's our
Nice.
step function generated as an example from whatever, from the SAM CLI. Okay, so this one, what does it do? There is a lambda, I suppose. Oh, it's funny because we are using references to lambdas. It doesn't fully understand that these are lambda functions.
Because the lambda doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist in this editor, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, these visual editors are always a bit limited.
Okay, let's go back, clear everything, re-add a single lambda, and try to go next just to see where we can go with the graphical editor.
So we can do a single lambda there.
Instead, change the state name instead of lambda invoke to something more.
Create newsletter.
Can you use dash?
I think so. Yeah.
In the API parameters function name, select your current lambda. Can you see that one?
Let's see.
That drop down function name. There.
There is a full stack bulletin. Create newsletter. That's the one. Create issue.
Okay.
The problem is this is, I mean, eventually we want to get to a unified deployment, like deploy the entire stack. This is keeping the two things decoupled, for better or worse.
But just because I'm curious, what is next in theory in this wizard?
Let's try. Okay, generated code snippet. This is just the definition, like I don't even get the YAML option there, but whatever.
By the way, we can copy and paste this in our code. Because it's creating the task called the create newsletter type task, invoking a lambda. The lambda ARN is there in line 11, and everything else is.
Except that what we will want to do most likely is not to do an ARN here, but more to say use the current source code, that lambda, and make sure you deploy the lambda together with the rest of the step function.
So the graphical editor stops to be useful here?
Pretty much, yeah. It could still be useful when we want to do more, I don't know, do parallel steps. What is the syntax for doing parallel steps? It's probably easier to just sketch something out and copy paste the syntax.
You draw the stuff, you get the code, and you change your code based on this. Okay.
Yes.
So back to the code then.
Thomas is saying he loves monoliths. We are doing a monolith and then slowly split it into other stuff.
I want to buy a t-shirt that say I love monolith, because I think we are going too far with the microservices.
So back to the code. Let's see. So what we want to do, I think we can just copy this template YAML into the main folder.
Calling it still template or changing his name?
So we will be removing this serverless YAML eventually. Sorry, I didn't mention this. Here I was using Serverless Framework, which I haven't been using it anymore in the last few years, just because, I don't know, it's an open source project that has taken a direction. No, I don't want to criticize it, but I think that now the tooling in AWS is just as good as this other project. So we might as well use the official one.
It was filling the gap, but now AWS catched up with the gap.
Exactly. So we will replace this serverless YAML.
So we will not use serverless anymore. We will use the AWS way.
Exactly. So let's copy this here, template YAML, and let's start to work on this. So full stack bulletin generates a draft newsletter for the next week. Okay, so the first resource is, let's call it full.
Internally in your monolithic Lambda, what is flowing? You have tweets that you read.
I can actually show you the code because it's not too bad. Handler, right? Let's make this a bit bigger. So create issue. So it's basically creating an issue. That's the goal. It needs to have a bunch of things like a Twitter client, a Facebook client, a Cloudinary client, because it's dealing with tweets, Facebook APIs, and also uploading pictures from into Cloudinary. Then what it's doing is bunch of timestamp stuff because it needs to figure out when is it now and when is the next Monday, like to schedule the next newsletter for. Then reading a bunch of variables from environment variables, for instance, which Twitter profiles, because it could be more than one, are the ones that I need to scrape. Right now it's just one. And then defines the campaign name. There is also a blacklist because I am not gonna repost the same article again. And also I was blacklisting certain URLs that I didn't like, for instance,
Where do you
Medium.
store the article that you already posted?
It's just an S3 file that contains everything.
Okay. So you're using S3 to store the history, the state of this.
Pretty much, yeah. Then there is a tech quote of the week. So this is another small library that just you give it a number, like the week number, and it gives you a quote consistently. Similarly, there is book of the week. It's another small library. I basically built like huge JSONs of all the things that I like and expose it as a library that give it a week number, gives you a book with all the details. Then this get links is basically the one that used to be its own library. Now all the code is inside the same repository. And this one is doing a bunch of stuff, but eventually it's going to give us some metadata on the 7 articles that should be part of the newsletter. Then we upload all the images for every article to Cloudinary. I think at this point we just call the MailChimp API to say these are all the placeholders for the template. So the 3 data sources are the quote of the week, the book of the week, and the links.
And the links comes from Twitter. And what
the
is
links,
Facebook?
it's worth checking out what it's doing. Go there, come on. Sorry, there. Okay, so this is done in a very weird style because at the time I liked this functional approach where it's like just a pipeline of steps. You might argue that now with async await, it will be just easier to write it in a more like
procedural way.
Exactly. So get last tweets is basically taking the Twitter client, taking the list of profiles, and it gets, I don't know, 200 tweets, whatever, the latest ones. Takes ones after reference moment is like, this is going to be only last week. So filter out all the ones that are older than last week. Then extract links, basically extrapolates from all the tweets only the links, because we don't really care about the tweet itself. We only care about links. Unique removes all the duplicates from the links. And shorten links, make sure that if there are short URL, which there always are with Twitter, you get the actual original URL.
You get them resolved.
Removes invalid. Sometimes there are invalid links. So I think this one also checks if
what
they
you
are
do,
not like
you
404s.
call it, and if it's giving 404, you discard it.
Exactly. And I think also checks for the structure of the link as well.
So all of this can be done with step functions in the future, with jumping of this state between the functions?
I think so. Maybe certain things would be particularly interesting. For instance, all this filtering and normalization, maybe not so much. But I think when we get to this one, get URLs info, this is basically trying to extrapolate all the metadata. So it's trying to figure out what is the title of this article, what is the description, is there a picture I can use? And it could be nice to just split it out into like a map step in a step function where you have already...
Yeah, you can do that in parallel, but even the validation of the links can be done in parallel, probably.
Yeah, I just don't know at which point you have enough of an advantage in doing it with like different steps, just because every step adds a little bit of overhead that you are invoking another Lambda, you are passing data that is serialized and deserialized.
Yeah.
So I think we'll need to figure out exactly when it's worth
Yeah,
it.
you need to find the balance between all of those stuff. Tommaso is saying, are all the state passed from one step to the next one?
So we'll see that in a second. Actually, well, here, just to finish off this point here, yeah, this is basically just processing everything around the links, and eventually you have a data structure that's like 7 links. For every link you have a title, a description, an image, stuff like that we can use in the template. And
cool. So now let's go back to our template file.
Just to reply to Tommaso, the idea in step functions, if we can go back, is that you have, so every time you execute the step function, imagine that there are many steps, right? The step function in itself is like every execution is like keeping track of what's going on across all the nodes. And you have this concept of you can store state for that execution somewhere. Initially, you start with an empty state, or you start with an event if you want, because you can invoke the step function and pass some input. That input is part of the state. Then every single step in the step function can receive as an input portion of that step, a portion of that state. You can define exactly which state flows into every node, but then you can also take the output of a node and inject it back into the global state. So as we start to create more states, we will see that one of the things we need to do is to map exactly what is the piece of input we want to give to this Lambda, and then is it producing any output that we want to store in the global state. And when you execute a step function, you can see for every node exactly how the state changes.
Curiosity, what is the start execution on the left?
On the left, start execution. Where do you see it?
AWS
this
function start execution.
Yeah, this is basically if you want to let a step function invoke another step function.
Ah, okay. Instead of passing the state, when do you need that?
Maybe, I guess, more advanced use cases that I had for work was like some like machine learning pipeline where there was a step function that needed to prepare a bunch of input. So it was convenient to do a step function just to see if this preparation of input was done correctly, and it required to call a bunch of APIs, read from S3, manipulate data from S3. But then eventually when this was done, the entire workflow was another step function. So the last step of that step function was like, now that the environment is ready, I can invoke that step function passing some values coming from the preparation that I did.
Instead of having a huge monolith,
exactly,
a huge diagram.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
So let's see here. Okay, here actually I can show you this concept of input and output. Where is it?
So what is the output of create newsletter, if any? You are in click on create newsletter.
In this case, it's not going to make too much sense. Let's make another simulation just to explain the idea better, because I think this is going to be more realistically what we want to achieve long term, like at the end. So we will have a bunch of lambdas, right? Let's just say...
Can you funnel together the data?
Exactly, yeah. So here, let's just say that this lambda is get book of the week. This lambda is get quote of the week. This lambda is get links, right? What we want to do is the output of this one is gonna go into payload.book. So this is basically mean that whatever we return from this lambda is gonna be injected in the state in the property.book. I'm quite sure this is the right syntax, but we will verify that when we get there. But you should get the idea that basically you can just say, this lambda doesn't have to know everything. It just does one thing, it returns something, then is the step function to orchestrate inputs and output and take whatever is needed.
And how do you make those three dots flowing in to create newsletter? Is automatic, or do you have to use some
I think it's automatic.
function?
Yeah.
Okay. If you go in flow, what are the options there? Just again,
if you go in flow, yes, here you have a choice, which is basically like an if statement. If else.
Parallel is what we used. Map run parallel workflow for each item.
Map is like could be the idea that if this get links only returns 7 links, and then we want to do something for each and every one of these links, what we
can use map on top of it.
Yeah, we could use map, and then it's like which lambda needs to be executed for every single item. And the pass, I think, is just to transform data. Like you can pass an expression that manipulates the data. Wait, success or fail. For instance, you can do like retry logic.
Cool.
So basically here the idea will be that this output will be, I don't know, dot quote, and this output will be dot links. And this create newsletter, what we could say is filter input. I think there is some kind of syntax where we could say something like, I don't know, that you can say payload and then just say book, quote, and I don't know, links.
And if you don't filter, you take everything from the previous
You get
step.
everything, yeah.
That can be our case because, I mean, we want everything. But
potentially we will want everything. But just to give you the idea that...
to give an idea that you can manipulate your input and output. Okay. Back to our template now.
Now, because we are close to 1 hour, let's see if we can try to deploy something. Well, to try to do something that is deployable. So let's see if we can create a very simple state function that is just one step, which is the entire lambda. So let's start from this template here. So this template here, it's type, state machine, properties. Okay, state machine. I like that it's called state machine. So I'm going to copy this and move it here.
To the root.
Can you move it to the root? Did it work? Yeah.
Yeah, seems so.
And now we are going to call it
stock trader in FS bulletin.
Yeah, create issue. And let's make it a YAML. I think it can be a YAML. And we want to copy the code from that other file, this workflow, which we will change in a second. Actually, let me do one thing.
How does he know? Sorry, go on.
So I just want to keep the previous one. Come on, you can do it. Okay, let me do it manually. New file, old.json. Just because here we have all the references, all the syntax to reference things in the current code that we don't have here. So okay, let me do a bit of order. So we have here a lambda which is already in source handler, right? So this is our lambda. So this is what we want to reference.
So on the left you have resource, and then there is on line 7, and then there is a stock checker function arm. Okay.
Yeah,
What is
here
the
it was just called functions, right? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna rename resource to functions. And actually I'm gonna create a new folder called create issue, which is the main thing, and move everything there. So now we only have functions create issues, and we should be able to reference that. Let's try to see what is the syntax. So what is the state machine? Create a new issue of full stack bulletin. Start at lambda invoke. So this is the first state. Create issue.
In the chat, typed reflection, say, ask if we are programming in YAML. Yeah, we are YAML engineers now.
Exactly. Yeah, we are doing a step function. So yeah.
Don't judge us.
You can probably do it with CDK in a nicer way, but I don't know. We just went for YAML for now. So what is the type? Create issue. The type is a task, which is basically a lambda. Lambda invoke. Output for now, let's just take everything. Payload, let's just take
On the
everything.
left, resource is stock checker function arm. They are taking that from.
So they were taking it from this template YAML. I'm sure that there is this guy somewhere. So we will need to copy stuff from this template YAML as well. Okay, so let's see. What else do we need here?
Do you pass any environment variable, all this kind of stuff?
I think we will need to do that in the Lambda itself.
Okay. So not a lot to do then here.
This is interesting. Error equals service exception. I have no idea what this is. So this is basically saying if there is one of these errors, do a retry.
Yeah, the off rate 6 times every 2 seconds.
Okay. I am surprised that we don't have to specify which lambda.
I think it's that line 7 on the left and right and 6 on the right. But we have to look at how do we have to define the stock checker function arm. That probably is again in the template. We have to look more in the template.
Yeah, exactly. So we probably can do this.
For now, yes.
So this is states, name of the state, type task, states.
It's the same level of type.
Okay, so let's just call it create issue function ARN. Thank you, Copilot.
Okay. And how do we tell which source code goes in that resource?
Now we need to use this template YAML. So we'll need to play a bit with this guy.
Okay. Definition substitution, get utter. Okay. Stock checker function is defined again in this file.
Okay, stock checker function. Yes, it will be defined in this file. Look at this.
Okay, here it's a which is the folder to use, and you have to change line 37 to point to your code.
So this one will be our create function ARN, and it will be called
create function.
Create issue
function. Sorry.
Without ARN.
Okay, without ARN. The other ones are not needed because
the other ones we can kill them, and it's complaining because it doesn't find this. Now state machines, we need to reference the new one. What did we call it? Create issue YAML. Actually, let's call it ISL YAML, just to keep the going. Okay. Definition substitution. So we did this. Now it's complaining about invalid get attribute. So this is not resolved because we don't have this function.
We have to create it.
So let's do that.
Line 30, yeah. Change the name.
Now the
Type
type.
AWS serverless function.
So we can copy that one.
Mm-mm.
Now we probably have a bunch of this stuff in the serverless YAML. Let's actually compare that. Because we did this stuff.
The same, or
it might be a little bit different, but I think we have.
Can't
so
you
see,
just
we
copy,
have node 16.
Can't you just copy from line 35 to 40 and change just the folder?
Probably easier. So properties. So code URI is functions create issue.
Yeah,
the handler is not handler. It's not app lambda handler. Is something else.
It's just handler.
Is handler dot function name, which is create issue, I believe. Create issue. And I think here we will see that thing specified. Handler, source handler create issue. Now we don't have source anymore. We are specifying code URI, so that should be it.
We can remove the other functions defined in this file.
We can, I believe. Now we'll need to add all these environment variables, by the way.
Okay.
Ooh, now there is something interesting there.
How do we take them out?
Because in Serverless Framework, you can just use this syntax to say, take the value from environment variables.
The environment variables of
the
which
machine
environment?
deploying.
The machine deploying?
Yeah, so it's going to inject them. So we'll
So
need to figure out how to
can't,
make this work.
We can't do this anymore, I think.
I don't know, to be honest. Let's see. Some get values from I'm searching in another tab. So we can use parameters, and then when we deploy, we can populate all these values. That's probably the way we should be doing, which is gonna be fun. Okay.
You are using a lot of secrets.
Yes. And this is because it's a monolithic Lambda that is doing everything. I think then we will have this secret split out in different things.
Yeah. So?
Sorry, was checking the chat. Yeah, they do use JSON path for all the references between input and outputs. And Thomas is saying probably you can put in line the definition without multiple references. Not too sure. Probably yes, but I don't know. Okay, for now I'm just gonna copy paste all of this, and I think the worst that can happen is that we deploy and it doesn't interpolate these values.
Environment with capital E, or because
let's see. So
architecture, they like capital stuff.
Environment, yes. Variables also. Oh yeah, because we can take environment from secret manager, so that could be another way.
From SSM, you mean?
From either SSM or either secret manager. So that could be another approach. For now, let's just do it literally like this. And I know that this is gonna complain.
Yeah, also because environment, you have probably to remove line 49.
Is it expecting? Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. Or is it a list? No, it's up. Cool. So we can remove all this other stuff.
Keep outputs.
We want to keep the output, and what we want is not call stock checker, create issue function. Oh yeah, I messed up everything. So let me move this one here.
Fix it.
Create issue function ARN. And the reference is create issue function.
This is like a Terraform out.
Yeah, pretty much. And we can also remove all of this. Okay. What else do we need? Now here is referencing policies. Where are these policies
Event
defined?
scheduled rate 1 hour. You want to schedule it differently, suppose.
Yes, and we have the expression here. This is like every Friday at 5. There. And enable true.
And the description, you can change it.
Schedule runs every Friday at 5 p.m. UTC. One thing that I'm not clear on is these policies, where they were defined. It's just generating the policies automatically, I guess.
I think so, but you have to put the name of your function.
Yes, okay. So let's, sorry, let me leave this one. Lambda invoke policy, function name.
Yeah, we just need one to be able to
Oh,
invoke
I understand
Lambda.
now. So this is generating the policy for the step function to be able to invoke those specific Lambda.
And there is also to write to Dynamo, but we don't need Dynamo.
Exactly. Okay, so this is probably something that we could deploy. It's not going to work with the environment variables. We might be doing something later about that, but this might just work.
What else we have in the FS bulletin folder? There is a make file. Do we need it? There is a some config also. Do we need it?
Let's see.
Oh God.
Wow. They have a way to run step functions locally. I didn't know it was possible.
So this make file is not to deploy, it's just to...
This one will run it locally with Docker. Then create...
Yeah, but the endpoint is still localhost. So this is still for local development. There is a publish in all of this, something that goes against AWS for real, or is all localhost 8083?
Seems that is all localhost, so this is all for testing, apparently.
Yeah, so for now we can skip it. Some config toml instead.
Okay, this is the interesting bit. So this one is the one we can use to populate the parameters, because you can... they're not using that. You can basically configure the details for how you want to deploy.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also specify if you use parameters, which, let me open this one.
We need to copy or move this file in the root folder.
So one way to receive configuration options is to create stack parameters. There is an example here. So we could do something like this, right? And then those stack parameters, you need to know them every time you deploy, so you can inject them in this toml file. It's a little bit like Terraform state.
Some deploy. Okay.
But we're not going to do this. I think I prefer to do something with like SSM, storing all the parameters in SSM. given that they are mostly all secrets. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah. But well, anyway, that's some config toml. We need to move it to the root folder.
We need no, because this is only for deploying the stuff which we are gonna delete. It's gonna create a new one the first time we deploy.
Ah, okay, cool.
Okay, so let's try to deploy and see what happens. I'd
So
fail, but
some deploy.
I forgot to change the branch, so I will fix the Git stuff later. But I think this is the same code we have in master because we just merged.
We merged
from there, yeah. Okay, so
some deploy. No.
Some deploy. Actually, I need to do export AWS region because I don't have that in my profile. Some deploy. So we can do some deploy guided, which is the one creating that file. And it's going to ask us, what do we call the stack name? Let's call it
FS bulletin.
stack bulletin create issue. Region, I have it in the thing, whatever. Confirm changes before deploying, yes. Allow some CLI to create roles, yes. Disable rollbacks, no. Save arguments to configuration file, yes. Some configuration file, some config toml, some configuration environment, no idea, default. Okay, so this is the change set. So this is what it's going to create for us.
Now I want to check AWS status.
So it's going to create a role for the function. Then it's going to create a Lambda function. Then it's going to create a role for the step function. So for the state machine. It's going to create a rule that is basically the one that knows when to trigger it. So every Friday at 5 p.m. It's going to create another role for what? Oh yeah, one role is to trigger the step function, and one role is the role of the step function, and then the step function itself. So I think all of this makes sense. We can create and see what happens. Hello, Anacleto. How are you today?
So now it's creating all the resources.
Yeah, this is the boring part where you can ask random questions. And as soon as you ask questions, this is going to fail because that's the way it goes.
It's the karma.
Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, we will speed it up. Probably. The one thing that I will be curious to check is which values did we get as environment variables?
I mean, or do you have them in your environment set up?
I have them in this file, which I'm not going to open, but I don't think that some reads that file and interpolates them for us.
I don't think so.
Which is what Serverless Framework was doing, not from the M file, but if you had them in the environment, they will be interpolated. Which, to be fair, is not a good... Go for
It's
it.
not a good practice. You were
Yeah,
sourcing
exactly.
.env and then running the deploy.
It was not a good practice also because if you open the CloudFormation stack, you will see all the values in clear text. Or even if you open the Lambda and you open the environment tab, you will see all the values in clear text. So it's much better to do it with SSM, which is probably what we're going to do next time. Okay, so something was created. Let's check it out. So if we go back to step function, we go to state machines. Yes, we don't want to save anything. We have this guy that was created for us. And can we edit, I wonder? Okay, it's showing us the shape. So it's just a start, create issue, and end. And this is the definition. And we can even open it in Workflow Studio, and it looks like this, referencing our Lambda. So now we can go and check this Lambda. So if we go to Lambda,
You want to see if there is something in the environment variables.
yes.
Do
But I
that
think it's just
off-cam.
going to be that $env syntax.
Let's see.
What was the name?
Create issue? No, what was?
Yes, this one. Create issue function. Okay. And I like that we can see all the code, which is something that last time we couldn't do because it was like a huge JavaScript file with everything minified.
Because Webpack was minifying it.
Exactly.
That makes
Here we
not
can
a lot of sense in Lambda.
read the code. So if we go to configuration, and I'm going to do this in another screen first. And if it looks safe, I'm going to show it. Yes, okay. As expected, what we got here is just this. So next time, what we want to do is to basically take all these values. I'm going to do the pre-work of pre-populating them in SSM. Then we're going to link them.
So we don't look at your passwords.
Exactly. Then here we will only have references to SSM, basically. And then we will be running the step function. If everything works, we are in a position where we can start to externalize parts of the code to dedicated lambdas.
Okay, so for today, we wrap up here.
Yes, just to give context to Anacleto who joined at the end, the recap of the day is that basically we are working on Full Stack Bulletin. Full Stack Bulletin is a newsletter for full stack developers. Free, every week comes out, gives you 7 links, a book, and a quote. But most of this stuff is pre-populated by some automation, and today we were working on this automation. Historically, it was like a huge Lambda doing all these things and creating like a draft of the newsletter. Now we are trying to decompose that into a step function with different steps. Potentially, then we will rewrite some of the steps in Rust, just because in this channel we like to do Rust, and this seems like an interesting use case. So writing lambdas in Rust, doing orchestration with step functions, and deploying to AWS. You can find the recording on YouTube, so I'm going to drop the link here, and I'll be publishing the recording of today as well.
Okay, like always, feel free to leave us comments, comment our pull request, open pull request. Everything is well accepted.
Yeah, exactly. So all the code is open source, and I'm going to drop the link to the repository again. And I'm going to make a commit as soon as I clean up all the mess that I created with these branches. But this is the organization where you will find all the repositories. And the specific repository is create newsletter issue, which is this one. All right. So with that, do you want to say anything to close up, Roberto?
Well, thank you for all the collaboration in the chat and for being here with us. Are we going to raid somebody?
Yes, but I'll need to find who. Oh yeah, Luke is streaming, and Luke is doing always crazy stuff. Last time I checked, he was doing his own programming language in Go, so could be
Okay.
interesting to watch.
Too much. Too much.
Okay, so
See you.
see you everyone.